What's up, guys? It's John here in plain sight, and I wanted to go into the last four games we've covered just because, like I promised, I wanted to go into the symbolism and gematria. But for now, I want to go into the narratives because that's something you can just see on TV every week. You can watch it tomorrow on First Take. So, week one, again, not much of a narrative, but you have the Eagles at Lions, and on 9/11, especially in these times, because again everything's very politicized, to me it was very obvious that the Eagles were going to win on 9/11. It's, again, never forget, they were saying that throughout the whole game, and there is some symbolism here that I will go into in future videos, like I said, but this one I thought was odd. Not odd, it's pretty predictable at this point, but if you look here from Jamal Williams' 1-yard touchdown run all the way down to DJ Chark's 22-yard pass, there was a total of 11 scores, of which 9 different players scored a touchdown. So 9-11. And it's plastered throughout the game. But essentially you have number 1 Hurts, number 11 A.J. Brown. And they weren't going to lose. They're top merchandise sellers. And believe it or not, in games like that, the top merchandise sellers usually win. The NFC East is always depicted as a very contentious one. So I expect the Eagles to win a game against the Lions or against the Vikings because, again, the divisional games are always more contentious. And again, it just on 9/11, the Eagles are going to win that game. Then we go to week 2, and Chargers at Chiefs, to me, it was just ridiculously obvious. After a good showing in Arizona, coming home, there's no reason that the Chiefs should have only been 4-point favorites. They should have been more like 7, as I had said, 6.5, 7. So that told me right off the bat that the Chargers were going to cover the spread. And they do this all the time. And that's why I said I could even see it being a field goal, because they do it so people will just miss the spread, and that's how Vegas makes most of their money. But the story coming to this is Mahomes going to play like he's been playing without his receiving core. And as you can see, he did no interceptions, which is nice, but 2 touchdowns and 235 yards, nothing on the ground. I mean, Herbert had more yards and an extra touchdown, more efficiency, and the rating was almost equivalent. So they're trying to, show that Herbert is entering club superstar as a quarterback because, again, they want more jerseys to sell. And B, can Mahomes get it done without these receivers, with just Kelsey? Now he's got Smith-Schuster, and Hardman got roughed up in that game. So that's the narrative they're setting up there. And that's why, again, I knew the 4-point spread did not make sense, which is why if you see one that's a little too good to be true, I won't put the Chargers in that one. Just, it was pretty obvious. And here on the opposite side of that, we have the Bears-Packers, where you saw kind of the opposite. So the Packers have not come out ridiculously strong. They had a good week 1 performance, but the Bears won their week 1 game as well. So, and again, the Packers weren't even able to win. They just had a good game. But in this game, week 2, they come into this matchup, and they're 10.5-point favorites. Again, after a loss against the Bears, coming off a win. So I thought that was odd. And of course, when you see 10.5, I thought it should have been closer to 6.5. And Fields has been great, but he has been terrible. And the story was, can Rodgers get it done? Is he too old? And of course, when you see 10.5 with division rivals, and the Packers aren't exactly a top 5 team, most people are going to pick the Bears with the spread, and then the Packers beat them by 17. And what this does is it sets up later in the season when it's Green Bay at Chicago, and people think, well, Packers beat them by 17, even in Chicago they should win, but the Bears will be about 2.5-point favorites. People are going to pick the Packers, and the Bears are going to win. So this is how they set up these narratives. And it's almost like reverse psychology, if you will. And then to go to the final one that I thought just really stuck out, which was Thursday's game, the Steelers at the Browns. Now, again, the Steelers come off of a week 1 victory against the Bengals. And yeah, the Bengals are having their Super Bowl slump, their hangover. But let's not forget, coming into that game, the Steelers were 5-point underdogs, 4.5, I think it was, or it might have been 5.5. It was like 5.5, I believe. But in this game, they're 4.5-point underdogs against the Browns. So Vegas is essentially saying the Browns are as good a team as the Bengals. So when you see that, again, most people would say, well, they covered against the Bengals. They'll definitely cover against the Browns. So a lot of people might have just taken the Steelers straight up here, or definitely with the spread. And the story here was they basically established Trubisky is the Fitzpatrick, the McCown. He's not going to win you games. He's just going to facilitate, if you will. And can Brissett get the job done as a backup? Well, he's done a really good job so far. His numbers are on line with Mahomes. If you look at what Rush did for the Cowboys, backup quarterbacks always come in and they people think that they're going to play bad. So, again, it's another Vegas trap. They probably thought maybe without Watson they wouldn't cover that 4.5-point spread. And that's how I knew he was going to have a good game, because now what happens when the Browns are 5-3 and Watson comes back? Then they have the narrative, well, do you stick with Brissett? So it's a very interesting dynamic, but this is how they set up these narratives and these traps. And it's not a coincidence that most of them are either night games and or divisional rival games, because those games are, again, the ones most people bet on. And people feel like, well, these games are always close. So most are going to take the Steelers with that spread, which is, when I see those things, I try and get it out there in a video that it's usually a trap. But yeah, please leave in the comments any specific games you want covered for this next week coming up. You know, none are really jumping off the page at me. I do find the Colts pretty peculiar. Again, with the first 2 weeks they had, I would think they'd be closer to like -10. So watch out for the Colts there. There's a couple other ones that kind of, Cowboys Giants is an interesting one. So there's a few, but yeah, just let me know if there's any specific games you want me to cover. I'll go into them. I try and only refrain to the ones that are very obvious, like the ones I've done so far. But if there are any specific players or games you want me to go into, I'd be more than happy to. And thanks to everybody else that's trying to just see the truth. Take care.